Didn't I tell you I was going golfing with my boss today? Geez, don't call me for stuff like that. When I frantically called my husband, the response I got was cold and distant. I had just received news that our daughter had been involved in a car accident. She was reportedly taken to the hospital, and despite the urgency, when I called my husband, who was out, he showed no signs of concern. I exclaimed, like, "What are you talking about? She's your daughter too." But his demeanor remained unchanged. "I don't care. Golfing with my boss is more important than she is." My name is Catherine. My husband, Bob, who's 3 years older than me, works for a major company in downtown. We met at a party thrown by a mutual friend after I started my career. Back then, I found Bob, who's dedicated to his job as a business person, very attractive. When Bob asked me out, I was over the moon, and the day he proposed felt like I was on cloud 9 after getting married. I quit my job to focus on household chores and enjoyed a happy newlywed life. A year later, we were blessed with a daughter named Emily. Raising her wasn't easy, but my mother-in-law, who lost her husband and lived alone, was always there to help, which was a blessing. Fiction now. Emily's in her sophomore year of high school. She studies hard, is active in school activities, and enjoys her life as a teenage girl, hanging out with friends and such. However, this year, there was a noticeable change in our previously harmonious family life. It started about 6 months ago, right after a long weekend. Bob had planned a trip with his colleagues, so Emily and I spent the holiday just the two of us. Like on the last day of the holidays, Bob returned, so we were having dinner together as a family for the first time in a few days. At that time, Emily talked to Bob about her plans for after high school. When Bob was away, Emily had consulted with me about her future. She had already decided to go to college, and I had given her my blessing, so all that was left was to get Bob's opinion. "Hey, Dad, I've been thinking," Emily said, nervously approaching the topic. I knew that Bob had been saving money for Emily's future, so I never doubted that he would support her decision. However, contrary to my expectations, Bob grimaced and replied dismissively, "Why should I care? Do whatever you want." I was taken aback by his cold response and unintentionally let out a gasp. Bob immediately put down his fork, left the table without clearing his plate, as if he was in a bad mood. Peeked behind. I wonder what got into Dad. Did I say something wrong? He's probably just tired from the trip. We'll discuss your plans another time. I tried to console her. Although Emily seemed uneasy, she accepted my explanation. However, the next day, things from that point on. Moreover, he started going out more on weekends, and the time we spent together as a family decreased significantly. Given the atmosphere, discussing Emily's future became impossible. Feeling consistently ignored without understanding why. Even my attempts to mediate didn't help, and their relationship worsened. Concerned about the situation, she even tried to scold him. But he decided to make matters worse. He even blamed me for discussing the issue with my mother-in-law. On the night my mother-in-law came over, after Emily locked herself in her room, Bob yelled at me, "Why did you talk to my mom? Don't meddle. It's because you've been cold to Emily, isn't it? Why are you ignoring her now? You used to dote on her so much." When I finally mustered the courage to ask why, Bob just glared at me with annoyance and didn't answer, no matter how hard I tried to mediate between the two of them. Bob's attitude didn't change at all. Time went by without knowing the reason for his change. But considering his sudden change in behavior after he returned from the long weekend trip, it's reasonable to think something happened during the trip. Maybe someone filled his head with nonsense. It might be all in my head, but I can't figure it out on my own. So, I decided to talk to my mother-in-law and investigate the reason for Bob's change. Then, one day, it was Sunday, but both Bob and Emily were out since the morning. As I was doing my usual housework at home, I received a call on the landline just before noon. I picked up with suspicion, and to my surprise, the caller claimed to be from the police. "Are you related to Emily?" I Steidsheim, her mother. Oh my God, did something happen to her? With a sinking feeling, I asked the officer back, and the words I heard next were completely unexpected. The officer said, "Actually, the bus Emily was on got into a traffic accident." I couldn't respond right away. I felt faint, and my hands holding the phone started shaking. Emily had told me she was going to the mall with friends, and apparently she was on the bus at the time. According to the officer, a car from the opposite lane crashed into the bus, and Emily and her friend were taken to a city hospital. After hearing the details of the accident and hanging up, I was in shock and couldn't move for a while. But I knew I had to tell Bob quickly, so I rushed to call him on my cell. After more than 20 seconds of ringing, Bob answered. He grumbled, "What is it?" Ignoring his tone, I frantically conveyed what happened to Emily. "Bob, this is serious. I just got a call from the police. The bus Emily was on got into an accident. She's apparently been taken to the hospital," I explained, tears streaming down my face. But ignoring my panic, Bob coldly responded, "What do you want me to do about it?" Seeing no signs of him being disturbed and feeling as if he couldn't care less, I got even more frustrated. "What are you saying? Please head to the hospital now. I'm going too." Before I could tell him the name of the hospital, Bob cut me off. Didn't I tell you I have a golf outing with my boss today? I'm staying overnight and coming back tomorrow morning. Can't help it." True, he had told me a few days ago about a golf outing with his boss today. However, I was shocked by Bob's lack of concern about our daughter's accident. "How can you even say that? Emily is your daughter's," I exclaimed. Bob replied, "I don't care. Golf with my boss is more important than her. You go to the hospital on your own," before hanging up abruptly. I tried calling back immediately, but it seemed he turned off his phone. I sent a text, but given his attitude, I doubted he would reply, even though they had been distant. Emily is his flesh and blood. How could he be so heartless? This incident completely shattered my trust in Bob, and I was certain I couldn't continue living with him. I decided on divorce, but heading to the hospital was my top priority, so I hurriedly left home. As he had declared, Bob didn't come home that day. He had said it was too far from the golf course, so he planned to stay at a hotel alone after golf. He even took the next day off work. When Bob came home the next morning, he was surprisingly cheerful, which was hard to believe for a father whose daughter had an accident the previous day. "Hey, what happened to Emily? Is she hospitalized?" Though Bob asked about Emily's condition, his casual tone made it clear he wasn't genuinely concerned. I was in the living room. Then I looked up to the sky, and Skyen replied, "She's there." Seeing my downcast expression, for some reason, Bob looked pleased. "I see. Well, that's a relief. Once Emily's funeral is over, we can get divorced right away." Saying that, he pulled out a piece of paper from his bag and thrust it in front of me. It was an invoice from a lawyer who assists in divorce procedures. By the way, it also served as a contract for lawyer consultation, and it already had his signature on it. I thought he was quite prepared, but since I had already decided to divorce Bob, it might have saved me some hassle. "All right, I got it." I quietly agreed to the divorce. Bob didn't even discuss the reason for the divorce. He just walked away to his room without saying anything else, as if he was done with me. The Bob who once cherished Emily and valued our family was gone. It was a harsh realization, but I didn't feel sad, only an increasing resentment towards him. Then, I called my mother-in-law and told her Bob was back, and contacted the lawyer. Within an hour, my mother-in-law arrived at our house, and Bob returned to the living room. As soon as my mother-in-law saw Bob, she approached him with tears in her eyes. "Bob, what were you doing when your family needed you the most? I never thought you'd be this cold-hearted," even when scolded by his mother. Bob didn't show any remorse. Instead, he was like, "I had prior commitments. What can I do?" And it was all her making a big fuss, looking at me with a mocking attitude. He continued like, "I've been dying to get divorced. With Emily gone, I feel so relieved. Now, I can leave without any regrets, speaking ill of not only me, but also Emily. I couldn't stand it any longer. Enough is enough." I shouted, thrusting a few pictures at Bob. The pictures showed a man and a woman closely together, looking intimate. The moment he saw the pictures, Bob's face turned pale. The man in the pictures was unmistakably Bob. "Where did you get these pictures?" Stammering, I told him calmly, "They were taken yesterday afternoon. But weren't you supposed to be at a business golf outing? Instead, you were with a young woman. What were you up to?" He confronted. Bob averted his eyes with a frustrated look. These pictures were taken less than an hour after I called about the Emily situation. Bob began to make excuses like she's just a colleague from work. "We just went golfing together." I sighed in disbelief. "Golfing in such fancy clothes?" "I don't think so." "I already know you're cheating, so save your breath." The word cheating made Bob's face stiffen. His inability to deny it immediately was telling. But this wasn't the first time I learned of Bob's affair. Recently, he often left the house without telling where he was going. So after discussing with my mother-in-law and getting some financial help, I'd hired a private investigator. The investigation revealed that whenever he went out, he met the woman in the photos, exposing his affair. His so-called business golf was a complete lie, and he probably stayed at a hotel with his lover. I have more evidence of your affair. I even have a video of you and that woman coming out of a hotel. I don't think you can get out of it. When I said that, Bob looked pleadingly at his mother, but she already knew of his infidelity and firmly shook her head in disapproval. To cheat and not even visit Emily in the hospital, and then to selfishly rejoice thinking she's dead. I don't know how you'll face your father. My mother-in-law said this with a mix of anger and sorrow. Bob froze in shock, his mouth agape. Wait, isn't Emily dead? I explained to a bewildered Bob like, don't jinx it. You misunderstood. She's very much alive. The injuries from the accident were just minor scratches. The accident wasn't severe, so she came home the same day. Bob misunderstood my comment, looking up to the sky she's there, and assumed Emily had passed away. Emily is on her school trip as planned. She'll be landing soon. Like a school trip? Bob was taken aback, his eyes wide. Bob, who didn't care about his daughter, had completely forgotten about Emily's school trip. The trip started today and was for 3 nights and 4 days. Emily had gone shopping for it yesterday. The doctor had said that there wouldn't be any issues with Emily going on the school trip, so she left as scheduled this morning. When I told Bob that Emily was up in the sky, she was probably boarding the plane. I used those words to indirectly blame him for not worrying about our daughter. Oh, that's what happened. Well, I'm glad Emily is okay. I hope she enjoys her trip. How can you say that now? You knew how much she'd been looking forward to this trip since sophomore year. But I guess you'd be just as happy if she had an accident. You probably forgot all about it. I sternly rebuked Bob, who tried to feign laughter. I didn't have a shred of affection left for him. No matter what he says in the future, I'm never gonna trust Bob again. Just then, an email notification popped up on Bob's smartphone. After reading the message, Bob's body began to tremble with anger. Shoving the screen in my face, he shouted like, hey! From Emily with a concise message. I can't consider someone who prioritizes his affair over his family as my father. I'm cutting ties with you. It was as if she was sending a message to a stranger. It seemed that Emily learned yesterday about Bob's lie about playing golf when he was actually meeting his mistress. She probably sent the email after landing. Being bluntly disowned by his 17-year-old daughter. Bob's face, which was pale just moments ago, turned a deep shade of red from shame and anger. He glared at me and began yelling. He was like, this is all your fault. Aren't you the one who cheated first? I was completely lost. But what are you talking about? When did I ever cheat? Don't play dumb, Jessica told me. Jessica? Who's that? Then I remembered that the detective agency found out that the name of Bob's mistress was Jessica. According to Bob, Jessica had filled his head with baseless lies about me when they first started their affair. She told him that I had cheated on him and that Emily was fathered by someone else. The detective agency confirmed that he began his affair 6 months ago, right when the relationship between Bob and Emily started to sour. Since Jessica works at the same company as Bob, they likely started their affair during the long weekend. Jessica had been spreading outrageous lies, saying I cheated in the past and had Bob raise Emily, a child fathered by another man. But Emily doesn't look or act anything like me. It's natural for me to have doubts. Both my mother-in-law and I were rendered speechless at Bob's outburst. Thinking Emily wasn't his because of Jessica's lie, he began to resent her and treated her coldly. But he didn't want a divorce because he didn't want to pay child support. However, mistaking Emily's accident for her death yesterday, he was relieved thinking he could divorce without any complications. You've got to be kidding me? So you believed a lie your mistress cooked up over your own family. No matter how angrily I shouted. Bob just responded with a dismissive laugh. I don't care whether it's true or not. I'm gonna divorce you and be with Jessica. Before he could retort, my mother-in-law stepped in. Just with a stoic face, she sighed deeply as she locked eyes with Bob. I realized she was livid. Objections, I wonder where I wrong raising you. I'm so ashamed. Did you forget that Emily looked just like you when she was a baby? She's definitely your child. I told you I don't care about that anymore. No matter how much she scolded, Bob remained defiant. I brought the guest to the living room. Bob looked puzzled. The visitor was a man in a suit, around our age. Bob rudely asked, who the hell are you? Are you her lover or something? He unfazed, The man handed Bob his business card with a smile. Bob accepted the business card with disbelief, but the next moment, his eyes widened in surprise as he read. Break to just a lawyer? Yes, he was the lawyer I had hired with the help of my mother-in-law. I had consulted him about Bob. Around the same time, I had the detective agency investigate. I had asked him to come over yesterday, anticipating that Bob would do something rash given the situation with Emily. I suspected it had to do with Emily, and I had a feeling Bob might have done something unthinkable. I told Bob, call your mistress over right now. Bob started panicking and was like, why would Jessica be involved? At this point, the lawyer chimed in, it's quite unreasonable to say she's not involved. Bob had no comeback to that. Realizing he had no way out, Bob begrudgingly contacted his mistress. About 30 minutes later, a young woman arrived at the house. Jessica looked like she was in her 20s and probably took a personal day off from work, just like Bob. She approached us with a disgruntled look. What's this all about? I've got nothing to do with your family issues. Despite Jessica's refusal, I told her that I was divorcing Bob, and that even if she stayed with Bob, he'd have to pay child support to Emily, who was about to go to college. Retributions. What? I've nothing to do with this. She insisted she had no involvement, but the lawyer promptly responded, we have plenty of evidence of the affair. Plus, you fed Bob some nasty lies, which resulted in irreparable damage to Catherine and her family. That's defamation, and we could sue you for it. By the time the lawyer finished explaining, both Bob and Jessica had turned pale, realizing they were out of options and not wanting a court battle. We went for a divorce. Just later on, I heard that Bob's company found out he'd been using his boss as a cover for his affairs. The whole company was appalled by the way he handled the situation, especially when they found out he pretended to be happy about his daughter's fake death. Exposing his true nature led him to resign from his position. Trying to find a new job proved difficult as word of Bob's misconduct had spread within the industry. Although he managed to find part-time jobs, his pride got in the way, and he constantly had issues with colleagues, which led him to quit frequently. The savings set aside for Emily's future had already been spent on his affair with Jessica. Soon after our divorce, the two broke up, and Jessica apparently quit her job too. But now that's none of my concern. Struggling, Bob turned to his mother for help, but was denied. He even tried to cozy up to me and Emily. He was like, please, I was wrong. Let's start over, the three of us. Of course, we rejected him. We blocked his contacts and moved to a new place with the help of his mother. Now, his mother lives near us, and we continue to maintain a close relationship. I've no idea what became of Bob, and I never want to be involved with him again. Freed from the stress of the troubled relationship with his father, Emily has been thriving in high school. Now, as a senior, she got accepted into her first-choice college. Congratulations! Emily, you did an amazing job. Thanks. #minds. It's all because you and Grandma supported me. Emily responded, tears streaming down her face. Since the college is commutable from our home, we plan to live together as we always have. I managed to find a job shortly after becoming a single parent and now work full-time. We have enough savings to cover Emily's tuition. I'm hoping for a bright future as we move forward, living happily with our family. While Walter adored Sophia, he always berated me and treated me roughly. During Thanksgiving, I took Sophia back to my parents' home, and while we were having dinner, I got a call from Walter. Expecting it to be some pointless conversation, I put it on speakerphone so my mother could hear. Then, Walter's cheerful voice came through. You don't need to come back. When? I've brought Sophia's moving boxes to the house. I was completely baffled by what he was saying. It's because of you that Sophia doesn't want to come home. If you just leave, Sophia can live freely with me like she did when she was a child. So get out already. I was beyond angry and just astounded. You can live in a shelter alone. All right. I replied quietly and hung up. Suddenly, my mother and Sophia burst out laughing. Inside, I cursed at Walter. He better be ready. It's gonna be too late to apologize later. My name is Michelle, and I'm a 55-year-old housewife. Walter was a senior in college, and after graduation, we met through a mutual friend and started dating. 2 years after our marriage, when I became pregnant, he was overjoyed. After our child was born, he actively took part in raising her. I often hear stories about fathers who are not involved in child rearing, but Walter was surprisingly involved in taking care of our daughter, Sophia. Many of my friends were envious. On the other hand, After giving birth to Sophia, he treated me as if I were disposable. He didn't hesitate to verbally abuse me, even in front of Sophia. Come to think of it, when we were dating, Walter seemed to look down on me, who is 3 years younger. Since we were from the same school, he didn't mock my education, but made fun of my age. Michelle, you're so cute, not knowing such things. I'm sorry. It's okay. I've lived 3 years longer than you, so I have more life experience. You won't go wrong if you listen to me. Yes. Back when we were newlyweds, he spoke more kindly. However, as time went by, he became more and more arrogant. Hey, many wives balance work and household chores. I'm taking care of Sophia, and you only have a part-time job for 6 hours. You should be able to handle it better, right? After attending a daycare committee meeting after work, and having only bought a single ready-made dish due to being in a hurry, he said all that. When I mistakenly scheduled the neighborhood cleanup a week off, he nagged at me for an hour. Get it together. I'm embarrassed when you're like this. Sophia will also be talked about. Do you intend to put Sophia through hardship being her mother? But Walter also read the neighborhood notice in front of me. Before I could mark the date on the calendar, he passed it to our neighbor. When I asked him which day it was, he answered confidently, so I assumed that was the cleanup day. It wasn't only my mistake, but if I pointed that out, he'd berate me tenfold. To end the argument quickly, it was best to show a humble attitude and bear it. Whenever I fell sick, Walter got upset. This is before marriage. When I told him that I wasn't in the best of health, he said such sweet words. I'm robust, so if you ever get sick, I'll take care of you. But when I did feel unwell, Walter would incessantly complain in front of me. While I lay weak in bed, I can't make dinner because I have a fever of 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit. You can't take care of your husband? You're failing as a housewife. I'm sorry. I think I caught something from a colleague. Can you please get some takeout or something from the store? Oh sure, always with the excuses. Sophia, let's go get some dinner with Daddy. When Walter returned home, he only bought alcohol and snacks for himself, and treats for Sophia, not getting anything suitable for me to eat. If you get us sick, you're in trouble. Right now, you're no different than a germ. Stay in your room until you're better. He snapped at me. As Walter closed the bedroom door, I could hear Sophia's concerned voice. Daddy, what about Mom's food? She'll manage on her own. We shouldn't get sick, so let's stay downstairs. Really gently. Actions. I was making soup in the kitchen late at night when Walter found me and yelled at me. What's this? You look fine. Don't fake it. Just because you want a break. I clearly look pale, can't you see? You catch a cold or the flu because you're not strong-willed enough. Thanks to look at me. I go to work even when I have a hangover. Seeing Walter puffing out his chest, I just lost the will to argue. Walter was always cold to me, but darted on Sophia. If she coughed even slightly, he'd panic, thinking pneumonia. If she got hurt at the daycare, he'd overreact, demanding pneumonia. If she got hurt at the daycare, he'd overreact, demanding. Walter would sneakily find out where he lived and stake out, eventually telling Sophia, "That guy has a childhood friend who's a girl. You should break up." This got him scolded by Sophia. So when Sophia brought her boyfriend, Kevin, to our home, I was worried Walter might chase him away. But Kevin was the spitting image of a gentleman, so Walter had to accept him. On your way out, please take care of Sophia. So Walter, sobbing and bowing his head, left Kevin looking surprised. Naturally, at their wedding, Walter cried like it was the end of the world, much to the amusement of our relatives. What such antics were endearing. Walter's behavior began to spiral out of control. Hey Sophia, why won't you live with us? Soon after she got married, every time Sophia visited, Walter would ask her. I knew the reason. Easygoing me and the meticulous Sophia had different personalities. Sophia realized this during her teenage rebellious phase, went to an out-of-state university and started living alone after getting a job. So at distance, she seemed to want to go out or chat, inviting me for shopping, movies, day trips, and even occasional cafe visits. This kind of distance felt just right, but Walter treated Sophia, now 30, like a child and kept pestering her about living together. If you're living in the next town, why not just live with us? I'm fine. I've Kevin with me. You're cold. I might get sick from loneliness. What are you saying? You're sturdy enough not to catch a cold. Initially, Sophia entertained Walter's whims, but he became too nagging, so she reduced her visits to just Christmas and Easter. Now, he'd send her messages every day, and if she didn't reply, he'd call to remind. Ignoring that as well, One day Walter just waltzed into her house. When Sophia and Kevin returned, they found Walter lounging in their living room, which shocked them. Apparently, Walter secretly took their spare key and made a copy after getting a call from Sophia. I rushed over to retrieve Walter. When I entered, Sophia was yelling at Walter, "Dad, enough is enough. This is our home. What's wrong with a father visiting his daughter's house? What are you doing? You can't just break into someone's home. It's natural for a father to care for his daughter." I changed Sophia's diapers, ate her, played with her at the park. You don't care about her like I do. I love my daughter and worry about her every day. I gave up trying to reason with Walter and forcefully took him home. Though he complied that day, Walter kept on with his antics, getting Kevin, a non-drinker, drunk at bars, dragging him to horse races and boat races, and making him spend unnecessarily. No matter how many times I cautioned Walter, he wouldn't listen and seemed ready to dig in his heels, so I stopped pushing. Right around that time, the summer holidays were approaching, and given it was the first one since my father's passing, I planned to take some days off work and visit home. When I mentioned this to Sophia, she said she wanted to go too. I'd like to visit the grave too. Okay, I'll let Grandma know. She'll be thrilled. My mother, now in her 80s, seemed a bit down ever since my father passed away. Even though my younger brother who lives nearby checks in on her, I'd like to visit during the holidays, chat with her, and help out with household chores. When I told Walter about this, as expected, he complained, "You're gonna be away for 3 days, even though you're a wife? We're also going to visit your parents' grave." It's not about that. Leaving me alone for that long is just not right. Since his parents had already passed away, we usually visit their grave first. I believe I'm fulfilling my duties as a daughter-in-law. I'll leave money for 3 days' worth of meals on the table. Ditching your kitchen duties? Make sure to catch up on cleaning, laundry, and dishes when you get back. I was tempted to retort, "Why not clean up after yourself for once?" but swallowed my words and got in the car. As soon as we left, Sophia vented her frustration. "Why is he so arrogant? Why is he so arrogant? Why is he so arrogant? Mom, are you okay being treated that way?" I've just gotten used to tuning him out. Seeing my half-smiling face, Sophia looked displeased, but she quickly changed the subject, probably out of concern for me. "Oh, speaking of which, about the new apartment we're moving into. You were living in the place that Kevin had since his bachelor days, right? And now it's gotten too cramped. With both Ethan and me working from home more, we felt the need for a home office." "That's great to hear. The new apartment is in the downtown area." I anticipated Walter making a fuss about it when he found out. That evening, my mother, Sophia, and I made meatloaf together, the cities in the middle of our meal. Walter called. He typically complained over the phone whenever I visited my family. Thinking to share the conversation with my mother, I put the call on speaker. Walter's cheerful voice echoed. "Having a good time over there?" "Pretty much." "What do you want?" "You don't need to come back." "What?" "I've brought over Sophia and Ethan's moving boxes. There's no space for you anymore." I was at a complete loss for words. I glanced over at Sophia, who looked just as perplexed as I did. Walter, sounding triumphant, continued, "With you around, Sophia won't come home. If you leave, she can live freely like when she was a child." What's just repeating season and already living quite freely with Kevin? Sophia protested from beside me, but it seemed Walter wasn't listening. "You can live alone in a facility." I was more flabbergasted than angry at Walter's smug remark. "Busy crest? Understood." I replied calmly and hung up the phone. Immediately after, my mother and Sophia, sitting next to me at the dinner table, burst out laughing. They couldn't contain themselves, laughing so hard they held their stomachs. Walter, as always, never listens to anyone. Talk about being in his own world. "This is crazy, Grandma," Sophia said, wiping tears from the corners of her eyes. I was too upset to laugh. My heart. I was cursing Walter. I had turned a blind eye to his antics because he was fond of Sophia, but this was the last straw. He better brace himself. An apology later won't cut it. After the call, I quickly finished my meal. I then arranged for a moving company and made another important call. As time passed, Sophia seemed to become angrier. As she washed dishes, she vented. No matter if he's the father, entering someone's house and moving their belongings without permission is utterly ridiculous. Real unforgivable, right? We can confront him together, but let him speak his mind for a while. I want to record everything. Got it. On the way home with Sophia, we stopped by a divorce attorney's office. The moment we opened the front door, boxes that couldn't fit in the living room spilled out into the hallway. Sophia's belongings? He really brought them here. Walter appeared with a grin for Sophia, and then glared at me. Sophia, welcome back. Why did you come back? Don't worry. I just came to grab some valuables and a change of clothes. I'll be moving out within the week. You finally get it. When I placed the divorce attorney's business card on the dining table and urged Walter to sign, he remarked with a smirk, I should have done this sooner. I kept you around thinking you'd be a good housekeeper since you're Sophia's mother. But I realized I can just make Sophia do all the chores. Hurry, the one who had been putting up with everything was me. I ignored him and started transferring my valuables into my bag. Hey, are you sure about this? Sure about what? It's you're being stubborn. You don't have anywhere to go, right? I heard your brother and his wife are moving in with your mom next year. You'll struggle living alone with your meager salary. Walter spoke to my back with arrogance as I packed my suitcase. If you change your mind now and apologize for everything and swear to serve me for the rest of your life, I might let you stay in this house. Thanks for the offer, but I'm good. I had already booked a place, and I'm just moving there a bit earlier. Oh, some rundown apartment? That would suit you better than this stylish room. Don't you think so, Sophia? Walter laughed crudely. Sophia, who had been frowning all this while, finally spoke. You're seriously mistaken, aren't you? Wait, Sophia? Oh, enough already? Dad, you seem to be under the impression that I dislike Mom. I need to set things straight. Walter's eyes widened in surprise. Comparing me and Sophia, a small smirk formed on Walter's lips. You're too late. I know everything about Sophia. How you found your mother annoying. How you chose a college with dorms because you didn't want to see her. But when you started working and living alone, you missed your dad and sometimes came home, right? Sophia, wrapping her arms around herself and grimacing, retorted. And you are serious? Walter's eyes widened in surprise. The one I found annoying was you. Dad. I left home because I couldn't stand seeing you verbally abuse Mom and watching her silently endure it. I also hated that I couldn't stop it. I looked at Sophia, shocked. Sophia, sure, during my rebellious phase, I might have been cold to Mom. But have you ever heard me say anything bad about her? I bet you haven't, seemingly hitting a nerve. Walter's face contorted in discomfort. If you treated Mom better, I would have commuted from home to college. The cold treatment I received from Sophia during her rebellious teenage years no longer bothered me. However, I always believed Sophia left home to avoid our disagreements. I never thought that Sophia hated me, but I did believe she didn't want to live with me. Discovering this unexpected truth made my heart heavy with emotion. Also, you think I don't know, huh? Hurt that you made from gambling? Walter's cheeks tensed up. What are you talking about? Feigning ignorance. Walter's face turned pale, his voice shaking. Don't play dumb. You used my college tuition for horse racing and boat racing, didn't you? Mom had to borrow money from Grandma to pay it off, right? McShelly. You spilled the beans. Walter shouted at me. No, I overheard you talking to Grandma in the hallway when you returned the money to her. I later asked Grandma about it. I had asked Mom to keep that a secret. I didn't know she told Sophia about it. Sophia glared at Walter and smirked. To you, gambling was more important than my college, huh? Sure, you were affectionate, but that's just how much you cared, right? Walter mumbled. That's not true. You and gambling, both were equally important to me. Proof is, I took you to the racetracks, right? If gambling was more important, I wouldn't have spent time with you. What's with that excuse? Retribution spelling. You seem to think that I treated your mother poorly, but that's not the case. Walter said emphatically, I was just trying to teach her where she was lacking, telling her to be more ladylike, more motherly, to be a good wife to her husband. I was just disciplining her to correct those things. What's wrong with that? Sophia closed her eyes, rubbing her forehead, clearly exasperated. Mind your own business. Who do you think you are, acting so high and mighty? I'm grateful that you played with me when I was a child, but you were always bad-mouthing Mom in front of me. I really hated it. It's releasing years of pent-up frustration. Sophia vented. While demanding 3 dishes for dinner and a spotless house, you leave your clothes everywhere and wouldn't even make your own coffee. Thanks to you, I grew up distrusting men and struggled with the idea of marriage. Walter seemed not to have heard Sophia's passionate plea. He let out a soft sigh and furrowed his brows. Seems like you've got the wrong idea. Sophia? Well, if we live together, you'll understand. What? I'm definitely not living with you. I'll move my stuff to my new place tomorrow. You've always been stubborn, huh? Or is it playing hard to get? I know deep down you really love me. Or you're just shy, aren't you, Sophia? Chuckling. Walter took the divorce attorney's business card, so we're gonna be total strangers soon. Move out quickly. Don't leave your stuff here too long. It's a hassle. I will. So you better find a new place too. If you dilly-dally, you'll get kicked out. What? Walter looked dumbfounded. I shot him a cold, sarcastic smile. Did you forget? This apartment used to belong to my father. It seemed the realization hit him like a ton of bricks. Seeing Walter's wide-eyed expression, I kindly reminded him. Remember when we were considering buying a house after getting married? Dad suggested we live here since a unit became available. Plus, it's close to your work. After Dad passed away last year, Mom inherited it. So it's hers now. Walter went pale, rapidly recalling the phone conversation he had had earlier. I smiled gently and continued. Mom was listening to our call earlier. She said she wouldn't tolerate someone so ungrateful and inconsiderate. So move out ASAP. Despite its age, the apartment is renovated and is quite a catch. They can't have you squatting here forever. But if you're telling me all of a sudden, desperately, Walter stammered, action. I thought my rent was being auto-debited from my account. Seriously? Don't you check your statements? And with your salary, there's no way you could afford the $1,000 rent. In that case, where are you planning to move? Without this place, you got nowhere to go. And I won't let you live with Sophia. His face red with rage, Walter shouted, but Sophia shot him a cold, icy glare. For your information, I don't waste money on booze, cigarettes, or gambling like someone I know. I've been saving up for my part-time job, and I've booked a spot at a luxury retirement home. Apparently, there's a vacancy right now, so I'm moving there. It's in a hot spring town, right? With an open-air bath? And you can see the ocean from the living room. Excitedly, Sophia chimed in. I smiled. Exactly. The view is amazing. There's even a personal garden, so I can do some gardening. That sounds fun. I'll come visit. Please do. So, Walter, maybe you should find a place you like. I don't have that kind of money. His voice dropping, but I sharply retorted. Figured as much. But I'll still be asking for alimony, so be ready to pay up. Interest expire you, Anoni? Ask you is Ilani? Pet Ilani. I never cheated or anything. I've endured 32 years of your verbal abuse. You'll pay for every bit of it. Even if you have to take on debt. I expect you to pay up. No way. Oh, I got it. We don't have to get divorced. Walter exclaimed, let's forget about this whole thing. You can stay in this apartment. We'll put the divorce on hold. That way, you won't have to leave, and I won't have to go, right? Glowing with what he thought was a brilliant solution, Walter was immediately shut down by Sophia's curt reply, are you for real? Ignoring the stunned Walter, Sophia called out to me, Mom, once you're ready, let's head back to Grandma's house. We can leave the rest to the movers. Yeah, we've got a reservation at the sushi place for everyone tomorrow, leaving a day's Walter behind. Sophia and I went back to our family home, though Walter was adamant about staying in the apartment after being persuaded by the property management that an eviction would be costly. He reluctantly moved to a small rental apartment. Later, when he resisted the divorce, we hired a lawyer for discussions, presenting recordings of Walter's past verbal abuses as evidence and informing him about the legal fees if it goes to court. He finally agreed to our terms. I didn't trust Walter, so I billed him all at once for the $10,000 in damages and the college tuition my mother had covered for him. After taking out loans to pay me back, Walter moved into a rundown apartment. After I shared the story of our divorce with colleagues, exaggerated rumors spread like wildfire, making it uncomfortable for Walter at work. At close to retirement, he resigned from his company and began working part-time jobs. It turns out, Walter had secretly racked up debt from gambling. It seems his severance pay went towards repaying the money he owed me and settling his gambling debts. He was denied re-employment and continuously failed his full-time job interviews. The vices he loved, alcohol, cigarettes, and gambling, became unaffordable. Working multiple part-time jobs from dawn till dusk, a mutual acquaintance told me. Sophia, who had initially planned to move into the apartment with Kevin, was bombarded with frequent calls from Walter and eventually blocked his number. But then, I started receiving daily messages and calls from Walter asking about Sophia's well-being, so I blocked him too. As of now, I have no idea where Walter is or what he's up to. I've since quit my job and moved to a high-end retirement home, enjoying my days at a leisurely pace. This whether it's sipping tea on my balcony overlooking the sea, taking in the night sky from the outdoor tub, or tending to flowers in my private rooftop garden. Time seems to pass so slowly here. It was an odd feeling at first, but I reminded myself this was my reward for years of juggling work and raising a child. Some were living in fear of my husband's verbal abuse. Even the air tastes sweeter. Sophia and Kevin live about an hour's drive from here, and I always look forward to their visits. Sophia did offer for me to move in with them, but I felt it best to maintain some distance for now. Recently, Sophia shared the news that she's expecting a baby, which filled me with joy. Looking ahead, I hope Sophia and I can continue to respect each other's lives, keep unnecessary meddling at bay, and maintain our close bond. It's our wedding day. Why isn't the bride and groom here yet? Hurry up. As I was going about my day as usual, my phone rang. Wondering who it might be, I was told something utterly confusing. Wait, what? I got married 3 years ago. I already have kids, so I had no idea why they were saying I was the bride. From the other end, there was a momentary silence, possibly as taken aback by my response as I was by their statement. We both seemed puzzled. Just when I thought it might be a wrong number, the caller said something completely unexpected. My name is Catherine Johnson, 32 years old. I'm a middle school teacher, and I have 2 children, a 2-year-old and a newborn. I'm on a 6-month parental leave, dedicating my time to taking care of my kids. I'm really grateful to my workplace for being so understanding and accommodating about taking leaves. Though I've gotten a bit used to parenting since this is my 2nd child, it's still a challenge, and I often find myself sleep-deprived. It's wonderful that my children are lively and energetic, but they can be quite noisy and tend to cry a lot, which means I don't get deep sleep. Trying to ensure that my working husband doesn't get sleep-deprived always ends up wearing me out. My husband works as a doctor, and the last thing I want is for him to make decisions with a foggy mind due to lack of sleep. So whenever a child cries at night, I comfort them in a separate room from where my husband sleeps. My husband might be often busy and not at home, but whenever he's around, he's very involved in childcare. This makes everything feel less overwhelming. But on his days off, my husband watches the kids, allowing me to get some much-needed rest. I often find myself thinking how lucky I am to have married such a wonderful person. Our days are hectic, but together we've managed to build a happy life, supporting and helping each other. Then one day, after I'd managed to get my energetic kids to take a nap and was enjoying a brief moment of relaxation, the phone rang again. Hitting the caller ID, I saw the name of a college classmate, which made me feel a bit wary. This classmate's name is Bob Miller. For some reason, I've always been somewhat uncomfortable around him. Back then, we were both in the same department, aiming to become middle school teachers. We had interacted a few times, and he seemed spirited and motivated at that time. He came across as the life of the party. Since our conversations were mostly about class assignments, I didn't know him that well, and I had no reservations about him. My perception of him changed during our shared internship. During this time, Bob acted self-centered, often disregarding my opinions and even blaming me for his mistakes. No matter how many times I pointed out his errors, he never accepted his faults. It felt like talking to a brick wall. He never listened. He believed he was acting with good intentions, never realizing the inconvenience he caused to others around him. So even when I corrected him, he remained stubborn, forcing me to clean up after his messes. Thankfully, both our internship supervisor and university professors were understanding and stood by me, allowing me to complete the internship successfully. I grew to strongly dislike Bob after this experience and sighed with relief when our internship ended, thinking I wouldn't have to interact with him anymore. But that relief was short-lived, because we were at the same internship site. I often found myself dealing with Bob's issues. This, unfortunately, gave him the impression that I was interested in him. He became overly familiar and clingy, acting as though we were in a romantic relationship. I tried clarifying the misunderstanding, but he brushed it off, suggesting that I was just shy. "You're always so kind to me. Bertie, you like me, don't you?" The only reason I communicated with him was due to our shared internship. Despite my clarifications, his puzzling confidence made him persistently clingy, which really wore me down. No matter how often I told him, His overfamiliarity and closeness always made me uncomfortable. Luckily, graduation was on the horizon, and with the support of my friends, my time dealing with him was relatively brief. My friends played a crucial role in creating distance between Bob and me. After that, due to working at different places, our interactions were limited to distant glimpses during extracurricular activities and school events. Though we hadn't spoken in a decade, I hoped Bob might have matured and reflected on his past actions. However, even the mere thought of interacting with him, especially when tired, was draining. Remembering Bob only brings back negative memories, often filled with miscommunications and having to explain the same thing multiple times. So, I have been avoiding him. But the persistent ringing of the phone disrupted my peace. Thinking it might wake up the kids, I reluctantly answered, wondering what he could want. Bob's initial words rendered me speechless. Kalu, after complaining about my delayed response, he said, "It's your wedding day. Why aren't you here? Get here quickly." Wait, I got married 3 years ago? His words filled my mind with confusion. I hadn't communicated with him in 10 years, so such a message was utterly unexpected. Baffled, I inquired if he had the right person. But when I informed Bob that I was already married, he seemed confused for some reason. I assumed he would soon realize his mistake and hang up, but instead, he made another bizarre statement. "We're in trouble. Everything for the wedding is set. Just come over quickly." For some odd reason, he seemed desperate to have me at the wedding venue, which left me increasingly puzzled. "You should be talking to your fiancé, not me." I thought I was pointing out the obvious, yet Bob kept urging me to come, saying the venue was nearby. I could faintly hear voices in the background, suggesting that the bride and her side of the guest list were absent. Still, I could hear voices from the groom's side, showing their confusion. It appeared Bob was genuinely conducting a wedding. Given I had no connection to this, and was clearly an outsider, combined with my fatigue from childcare, my patience with Bob's inexplicable behavior was wearing thin. "Listen, I've been married for 3 years and have kids. What are you talking about?" I struggled to comprehend Bob's ramblings, but tried to stay as calm as possible while questioning him. But Bob didn't give a clear answer and just kept insisting I come to the venue. "You have to come. Everything's ready. If you don't, we'll have to pay cancellation fees. Just wear the wedding dress. No sees." I felt perhaps I was worrying too much. Yet, in the following days, persistent calls from Bob confirmed my anxieties, and I realized that my husband's words were not exaggerated. As a result, I decided to be cautious, not venturing out alone, and resolved to contact the police if needed. Ignoring his persistent calls, a few days later, my home intercom buzzed. Curiously, I grabbed my phone to be ready to call for help if needed, and to my shock, there stood Bob. He shouldn't have known my new address since our student days, so seeing him in front of my home sent chills down my spine. It's relieved I hadn't opened the door. I inquired about his visit via the intercom. Well, I'd rather not have responded. He kept ringing the bell, causing my kids to become concerned. "Hey, since you wouldn't answer my calls, I thought I'd come over and talk directly," Bob said cheerfully, his smile unnerving me. I asked how he knew my address, and he mentioned having asked around our college acquaintances. "It wasn't easy, you know. No one wanted to tell me," he admitted. While feeling angry at whoever revealed my address, I continued to deal with him through the intercom. "It's inconvenient talking like this, let me in," he insisted. Despite his nagging, I refused entry and urged him to get to the point. When he finally started explaining, it was headache-inducing. He had called me to the wedding venue the day before the ceremony because his fiancée had vanished, and he wanted me to fill in for her to avoid cancellation fees. I met my fiancée on a free dating app. Maybe that's why she lacked common sense since it was free. Bob complained, well, he ranted about his fiancée. I thought they seemed a perfect match, given his unreasonable actions. And sure enough, without a bride, the wedding was a disaster. Bob was apparently scolded by his family and relatives, and had to pay the cancellation fees. "Now, since you didn't come, you should cover half of the costs," he claimed. "What are you talking about?" I exclaimed, my jaw dropping. Unbelievably, Bob wanted me to pay, saying that he was being generous and only asking for half. "I had nothing to do with your wedding." I firmly refused, but he kept blaming me. Feeling overwhelmed and unable to handle the situation, I threatened to call the police. That seemed to deter him, and he finally seemed ready to leave, but not before saying, You didn't show up when I asked, so I'm gonna send you the bill. Make sure you pay. However, Bob insisted that I pay him before finally leaving. Essentially, the consistent tease. The audacity of his demands, coupled with the fact that he'd come to my house uninvited, left me mentally exhausted. Once I confirmed he was gone, I felt drained and slumped down in relief. Later, a detailed invoice and a letter insisting on how much I should pay were sent to me. Feeling overwhelmed, I consulted my husband. He too was taken aback, not expecting anyone to act in such a manner. Together, we brainstormed how to handle the situation. A few days later, after leaving our kids at their grandparents', we headed to the address mentioned in the letter. Upon seeing the address, my husband felt a sense of recognition. When we rang the bell, a couple answered the door and were surprised to see my husband. "Why is the doctor here?" It turned out my husband was their family physician. Never had I imagined that Bob's parents would know my husband, reminding me of how small the world can be sometimes. "We apologize for the sudden visit, but it seems your son has been pressuring my wife to pay for his wedding expenses," my husband explained succinctly. The couple, clearly shocked, hurriedly called Bob. While waiting for him, we provided a more in-depth explanation, showing them the invoice and letter. Seeing the documents, they sighed heavily and looked troubled. "We're so sorry about our foolish son's behavior. We had no idea he was doing something like this," they apologized. Soon, Bob arrived, nonchalantly asking, "Why did you call me back suddenly? Oh, did you come to pay?" Thinking we'd come to settle the bill. Bob looked pleased until his father reprimanded him. "What do you think you're doing? Demanding money from someone who had nothing to do with your wedding?" "Oh yeah." Bob remained unfazed by his parents' scolding. At that point, my husband sternly said, "You've been harassing my wife to pay for your unrelated wedding expenses. We can report this to the police, you know. Who the hell are you?" Bob responded initially dismissively, but when he learned that the stranger was my husband and also a doctor, his attitude shifted. When my husband revealed the reason for our visit, Bob instantly started to act flustered, trying to dodge the situation. "Great fiction, I wasn't harassing her. She just owes me that money," he declared. Despite our confrontation, he persisted with his demand, coming up with various justifications. It seemed like he genuinely believed what he was saying, making me think this was going to be a long conversation. I was feeling really frustrated. Just listening to Bob's side wouldn't resolve anything. He seemed unaffected even by his parents' scolding. So, I decided to start asking him methodically to understand why this was happening. Although he was a teacher and supposed to be mature, I felt drained having to handle him as if he were a child. "Why didn't you first reach out to your fiancé before contacting me?" "Why?" I asked, believing he would have had numerous ways to contact his intended. I'd been too eager to end the call when he'd phoned and hadn't inquired about this. "I tried many times but couldn't reach her. That's why I asked you to stand in," Bob replied nonchalantly. However, when both his parents and my husband gave him stern looks, he finally seemed to feel a bit uncomfortable. But towards me, he had a big attitude and was rather self-centered in his narrative. Yet, when cautioned by my husband, a doctor, he became more subdued. It appeared he respected titles more than people. The realization that such a person was teaching impressionable middle school students made me apprehensive. Still, I continued, now curious about his fiancée. Turned out, he had started dating her about 6 months ago after meeting on a dating app. After introducing her to his family, marriage was expected and they decided to go with the flow. She apparently didn't have any immediate family, so the wedding talks progressed rapidly. They both had been on board at that time. But then, she suddenly said she can't get married and became unreachable. Bob added, "We had everything ready for the wedding, and all the guests were invited. It's hard to call it off, just because the bride isn't available." He recalled that I worked at a nearby middle school, and assumed I'd still be single, hence his call. "You had a crush on me, right? So, I thought this would be perfect. Plus, you get to wear a free dress and enjoy a feast. It's all good, right?" Hearing Bob's absurd reasoning, I was taken aback. Firstly, I'd never been interested in him, and being assumed as perpetually single was irksome. His parents were clearly shocked by his audacious claims as well. Despite my growing mental distress, I continued to ask questions, and eventually found out that his fiancée's name was Lily Young, and she worked as a nurse at the same hospital where my husband practiced. "I probably know her." "I'll let her know," my husband said, a puzzled expression crossing his face after hearing the name of the fiancé. From Bob's explanation, we couldn't grasp the full picture. Thus, we decided to reach out to the fiancé through my husband to discuss the matter. I believed that if the involved parties talked it out, the issue would be resolved. But just when I thought the matter was settled, I received a call from the fiancé a few days later. I heard from the doctor. I sincerely apologize for dragging you into this. Lily, who is Bob's fiancé, apologized in a calm and respectful manner for the chaos caused. Given the impression I had of Bob, I was secretly taken aback by Lily's courteous demeanor. I felt that perhaps my husband's odd reaction when mentioning he knew Lily was, because he was aware that she wouldn't behave so irrationally. Lily expressed her wish to discuss the matter in person. I've heard his side, but it's still confusing. I'm sorry, but can we meet to clear things up? Feeling curious about how things escalated to this point, I agreed. We met at Bob's family home, where his parents, Lily, and I gathered to hear the whole story. We were informed that the wedding had actually been called off 2 months prior, contrary to Bob's claim that it was only the day before, which shocked us. Moreover, after canceling the wedding, they had already paid the necessary fees. After wrapping up these matters, Lily had parted ways with Bob. However, out of the blue, he called her, insisting she attend the wedding ceremony the next day. Having received a sudden call from Bob asking me to stand in as the bride, I could relate to Lily's confusion. We had already canceled the wedding and were no longer seeing each other. When I asked why he was still going through with the ceremony, he just said something like, "Because it's all set up," which sounded like he was just joking around. I immediately hung up and blocked his number. It became evident that Bob's version of events was far from the truth, leaving everyone dumbfounded. We always thought you two were getting along just fine. Why didn't you tell us when you decided to call off the wedding? His father, still in disbelief, questioned the lack of communication and courtesy. Under normal circumstances, an apology or explanation would be expected. I was planning to come over and explain, but Bob insisted he would handle it. Lily responded she was aware of how thrilled Bob's relatives had been about the wedding. However, after the breakup, she intended to formally address the matter, but Bob stopped her. "You don't need to come over. It'll just upset my parents more. I'll handle it." Bob had told her. That's really lacking in manners, don't you think? She always believed that a final greeting was just common courtesy, but Bob strongly objected to it. Knowing how happy Bob's parents were when the engagement was announced, she just let it be. "I should have at least secretly informed you. I'm so sorry." And she apologized for the whole mess. From all this, it became clear that Lily wasn't at fault. But everyone was puzzled why Bob was still preparing for a wedding even after canceling and paying the fees. Having canceled the wedding and breaking off the engagement, there seemed to be no clear reason why Bob still wanted to hold the ceremony. Then, with a straight face, Bob said, "I already told people I was gonna get married. Backing out now would be so embarrassing. That's why I reversed the cancellation." Bob's reasoning was that it was too embarrassing. Embarrassing to call off a wedding after announcing it, and he didn't want to pay the cancellation fees, hence he continued with the wedding preparations. I thought asking someone to step in as a bride on your wedding day would be more embarrassing. I seriously began to wonder how Bob's mind works. The planner was happy when I said I wasn't going to cancel the wedding, so I figured it's best to go on with it. He thought he could just have a regular wedding ceremony without actually getting legally married, and despite being separated, he contacted Lily to attend the ceremony. "We have a fancy dress and a feast prepared. Why wouldn't you come?" Everyone was taken aback by Bob's nonchalance. Holding what's supposed to be the most important ceremony of one's life just for show, and not telling even your close family and friends about it. Everyone was furious and demanded Bob to bear all the costs. After all the chaos caused by Bob's recklessness, this seemed only fair. But Bob started whining, claiming he didn't have that kind of money. Yet, where did the money Tom had paid for the wedding cancellation go? If the cancellation was reversed, that money should have been returned, so he should be able to pay for it. While I was pondering this, Lily suddenly grabbed Bob's wrist. "You bought another one, didn't you?" On Bob's wrist was an expensive-looking watch. "The reason I called off our wedding is because of your outrageous spending." Bob, spending $5,000 on a coat or $1,000 on shoes. I can't be with someone who doesn't listen and spends money recklessly. But it was the last piece and on sale. I had to buy it. I don't have any debts, so what's the big deal? Turns out, Bob used the cancellation money to splurge on luxury brands. He buys impulsively when he wants something. Certainly, with such behavior, their marital life would have been a tough one. Although he isn't in debt now, it seemed likely he would end up borrowing money just to satisfy his shopping urges. The teacher's salary isn't that high to afford such luxuries. Ordinarily, he'd be bankrupt by now. I wondered where he was getting all this money from. The person who was most infuriated by all of this was Bob's mother. You don't save, and you don't contribute a cent to the household. Is this where your money has been going? Bob lived at home because his workplace was nearby, relying on his parents for rent and even groceries. Initially, when he started his job, he wasn't earning much and didn't have significant savings, so his parents didn't particularly ask him to contribute financially to the household. But even after a decade, he still didn't contribute to household expenses and claimed to have no savings. His parents found this strange, but never imagined he was spending on such extravagances. They'd been concerned but trusted Bob when he assured them he was managing his finances and planning for the future. It's natural for parents to trust their grown-up children when they say they're okay. Bob, now in his 30s, neither helped with house chores nor contributed financially, fully relying on his parents. He could afford such luxuries by spending his entire salary on his whims. But with this wedding fiasco and learning about Bob's spending habits, his parents decided they won't pamper him anymore. Listen here. You'll pay every penny of the cancellation fee yourself. Don't you dare burden others with your problems. Bob's father yelled furiously, and Bob finally fell silent, nodding with a pale face. Later, it turned out that Bob had been asking several people for my address. Among them, someone who found his behavior suspicious reached out to me. Once I explained the situation, word of Bob's misconduct quickly spread among the school staff. From the beginning, parents didn't think highly of Bob at school as he didn't seem to take his students' concerns seriously. Students saw him as a friendly and approachable teacher, but not one to go to with serious concerns. As a result of the circulating rumors and the uncomfortable environment, it seems he resigned from his teaching position. His parents, having had enough of his irresponsibility, seemingly kicked him out of their home, without any savings. Bob resorted to selling his luxury goods to find a place to live and is apparently now living in poverty. Moreover, he didn't have the money to pay the cancellation fee and ended up in debt. So it looks like he's going to be stuck in this poor lifestyle for a while. Because of all this, he apparently doesn't have the energy to come at me with any more crazy ideas. Furthermore, his parents, wondering where they went wrong in raising him, apologized to me. They assured me they'd keep a close eye on him, so he wouldn't cause any more trouble if his stricter parents are now watching over him. I don't think I'll ever encounter Bob again. I finally felt relieved, knowing I wouldn't have to deal with him. As for me, I've been busy with childcare as usual, but with my maternity leave coming to an end, I'm preparing to return to work. I always knew that small actions could lead to unexpected situations, but never thought I'd get dragged into something like this, despite being cautious. I hope nothing like this ever happens again, but if it does, I've decided I'll handle it calmly and safely. A housewife who doesn't cook ends up divorced, you know? Tom punched my belly lightly. I didn't think he used much force, but that was where my precious baby is. Hey, stop it. Surprised by Tom's unexpected action. I reacted excessively. Tom, seeing me like that, chuckled. If you don't like it, hurry up and make lunch. Look, even the baby is saying it. Or Dad's starving because of Mom. I got it, so stop. Just not my belly. Don't hit my belly. I screamed in a voice resembling a scream, and Tom finally stopped. I'm tired. Just do as you're told from the beginning. He hurry up and make it. Dash like a sprinter. Tom said that, looking satisfied. Then he froze as he looked at the computer screen in front of him. Foul. I somehow got off the chair, distanced myself from Tom, and said while restraining him with scissors nearby, "This time, I won't let you make excuses." Well, there shouldn't be a need for that. This is a lie, right? With this, I won't let him escape. This time, I'll expose his true nature. I am Hannah, 29 years old. I work for an electrical appliance manufacturer, but I'm currently on maternity leave, so I'm pretty much like a housewife. The reason for saying pretty much is because there's a reason. Doing some odd jobs and irregular remote meetings. I'm allowed to participate in those. That's because, due to my pregnancy, I entrusted the project I was involved in to my junior. I asked to participate to understand the flow of things. However, I rarely speak and am more of a bystander. Virtually, even so. I was happy to be able to participate and know the progress of the project. Seriously, that's just labor. It's a waste of time and it's annoying. Stop it. Completing in this dissatisfied tone is my husband. He's 36 years old, 7 years older than me. He was originally my boss at work. The mom, who was good at his job, was always relied upon by those around him. I was gradually drawn to him by his kind guidance. Getting married to Tom was fortunate, and people around us envy us, but he changed after marriage. Don't say that, even if you call it work. I'm just doing odd jobs and attending meetings, right? Sometimes. I'm just observing. That's a waste. How about cleaning the room if you have that much time? I saw dust accumulating under the furniture recently. Tom pointed to the TV rack and the floor gap. It was a place I couldn't clean without bending down. I'm in the last month of pregnancy, and with this belly, it's impossible to bend down. So it's true that I've been neglecting cleaning in that area. I'm doing what I can for now, but I'm sorry. In a situation like this, normally the wife's parents would come to help with household chores. But you don't have that. Ken said with a sigh. My chest hurt. My parents passed away in an accident 10 years ago. It's been 10 years already, but it still feels like 10 years ago. Or yeah, Tom casually makes fun of me for not having parents like I do now. And they always had to apologize. I'm sorry. I'm causing trouble. Then, Tom would always smile satisfied. You're lucky. Being able to marry a generous guy like me. I never thought I'd marry an ordinary woman like Hannah, with no special qualities. This is how Tom satisfies his ego. Every day is a barrage of sarcasm or bragging. He wasn't like this before we got married. Is it inevitable for people to change after marriage, regardless of gender? Furthermore, it's unfortunate that Tom has such a great facade that nobody believes me, no matter who I complain to. I get off-target responses like, you're just being spoiled. Or it's good to be reliable. As everyone says, I could endure this much and just let it go. But recently, I've been troubled by Tom coming home after work. From the evening to the night, when the sound of trying to unlock the door, it's the signal of him coming home. Even if I was in the middle of doing some housework, when he comes home, I'd rush to the front door. And as I look at the opening door, I pray. I hope Tom is in a good mood today. Hence, when he's in a good mood, I will receive reports like, the company did well, or I executed a contract. The problem is when he's in a bad mood. So annoying. That outdated guy. The moment he enters the door, stomps his feet, making a loud noise. Welcome, hun. He tosses his bag towards me and heads to the bath, clicking his tongue. I was really scared of this whole sequence of actions. I considered divorce when this continued for several days. I first consulted with a colleague, but he didn't believe me. Tom, that's impossible. You're exaggerating. Look, you're pregnant and maybe tired, right? How about taking a break for a change of pace? The response was as if he was implying that I was the one being strange. It's sad, but I understand my colleague's feelings. Tom, when we worked together, was perfect in everyone's eyes. Always smiling, gentle, and calm. I don't think even my past self would believe that he could transform like this. Maybe it's just a passing phase. Perhaps he's becoming irritable because he's busy and tired. I decided to think positively. It's not like he's hitting me or anything, but when he throws things or shouts, my body flinches, but he has never physically harmed me. Someday, he'll return to being the kind person he used to be. I hoped and prayed for that. No one would believe that Tom has changed. But except for one person. That's my Uncle Bob. My grandparents live far away, and my parents passed away. After the accident, I was left alone, but I had one reliable relative. That's my Uncle Bob, my father's younger brother. Because he moved to the city before my father did. He happened to live near our family by chance. Honestly, Bob looks scary. He's 6 feet 3 inches tall and has a good physique. So just standing there, he exudes an intimidating presence. However, he's incredibly kind and a wonderful person on the inside. When I was young, instead of my busy parents, Uncle Bob would often play with me. Back then, I thought of Bob as unemployed. That's how much he kept me company. I think he cared for me like a real daughter. And you know, I was the first one to hold Hannah in my arms. He often joked like that and bantered with my father. So after my parents passed away, it was indeed Bob who supported me. In my days, Bob took care of most of the procedures for me. When I didn't even feel like eating, he would make light meals like oats porridge or soup. I remember that I couldn't really say it was delicious, but I inadvertently put it in my mouth. After my parents' accident and my subsequent dropping out of college, Bob was the one who introduced me to a job. But I hesitated, feeling sorry for using connections. Bob said gently, "Don't get it wrong. It's just an introduction. It's up to Hannah how you work from here on out." I don't know. I'm able to repay my parents. I want to repay Bob. That was my goal. I had put up with a life with Tom, who just spewed abusive language. But one day, Tom finally raised his hand against me. At first, it might not have been intentional. Tom was in a worse mood than usual that day, and I knew I had to be careful. But I was also not feeling well and didn't have the patience. So, I inadvertently muttered to the point against Tom, who would pick on everything. "Oh, shut up." The moment I said that, I knew the room had frozen. I messed up. I needed to apologize quickly. I immediately apologized, but it was too late. Sure, a magazine flew right by my face. Tom had thrown it in anger. "Tang, what did you just say? Did you call me noisy when I came home tired?" Then, from there it was useless to say anything. Kept throwing things one after another. Fortunately, he had rational even though seeming crazy. Everything he threw was light or thin. Maybe because he had done it once, the threshold had become lower, and from that day on, though weak, would raise his hand at me over trivial things. Scared, I thought of consulting Bob. Actually, Bob worked at the same company as us. He had introduced me to this company because he could be flexible with various things in the company. Tom hadn't said anything about Bob, so he probably didn't know they worked at the same company. But I had introduced him once, so he recognized Bob as my family. I was sure Bob would believe me. I had that kind of conviction. But unfortunately, Bob was on a business trip abroad at that moment. Read about me? Bob offered to listen to me over the phone if that was okay. For a moment, I thought I should lean on him, but Bob is that Bob? If he knew my current situation, he might rush over. That wouldn't be fair to the company and Bob. Helplessly, I decided to wait for Bob to come home. By the way, I also consulted my colleague and friends, but nobody believed me. Moreover, somehow, the fact that I was talking about Tom reached Tom himself. Tom apparently laughed sadly, was like, I intended it as a form of physical closeness. Everyone completely believed this excuse. Thanks to that, I ended up being treated as just an overly self-conscious wife. One day, as I was working in my room as usual, came by. It was unusual. Tom's day for remote work too. I knew this in advance. "I'm hungry. What about lunch?" Tom said, almost tossing it out there. "Oh, just wait a moment. I'm working." Tom let out an irritated sigh. Then from that tone, I immediately understood. He's coming, the usual one. I instantly tensed up and prepared myself mentally. Usually, it's either the arm or the leg. And Tom approached me with a nasty grin on his face. A housewife who doesn't cook ends up divorced, you know? Tom punched my belly lightly. I didn't think he used much force, but that's where my precious baby is. "Stop it, please." Shocked by Tom's unexpected actions, I reacted excessively. Up until now, he never went for my belly. No matter what, I curled up on the chair, trying to protect my belly with my own arms. The tears welled up from fear and anxiety. Seeing me like that, Tom laughed in amusement. "If you don't like it, then make lunch already. Come on, even the baby is saying it. Dad's hungry because of Mom. Please, just don't hit my belly." Why would he do something so cruel? I'm his wife, and the one inside my belly is our child. I couldn't comprehend it at all. I don't want to do this thing. But you know, it can't be helped. You don't make lunch. Dad's pitiful, huh? Well, speaking like that, Tom's hand didn't stop. He persistently hit my belly over and over. I couldn't resist much because I was seated in a chair, making it difficult. All I could do was defend myself as best as I could. "Okay, I get it. Please stop. Just don't hit my belly." Screaming in a voice similar to a cry, Tom finally stopped his hands. "I'm tired. It would have been fine if you just did as I told you from the beginning. Dash over." Saying that, Tom lifted his face, looking satisfied. And then he froze as he looked at the computer screen in front of him. I somehow got off the chair, distanced myself from Tom, and said, while restraining him with the scissors that were nearby, "I won't let you make excuses this time." "Well, there shouldn't be a need for that. This is a lie, right?" Answering Tom, who was all pale and flustered, was a person on the other side of the computer screen. I want to believe it's a lie too. I never thought you'd be such a despicable person. The one holding his head in his hands. On the screen was the department head. Several other employees were looking at us with disgusted expressions. No, it's not like that. I didn't hear anything. Yeah, I was set up. I was tricked. Tom clung to the computer, almost groveling to the department head. You have a bad reputation. Didn't I tell you? I said I was in the middle of work. So wait, I didn't lie or deceive anyone. If that's the case, then say you're in a remote meeting properly. If you did that, then Tom started to say, then stopped himself, his face pale with realization. He was about to say, if you did that, then I wouldn't have hit you. He's a guy who cares a lot about appearances and what others think. And then Tom, a sly and cunning man, he wouldn't even rouse his hands against another person's or utter foul language at work. That's why nobody would believe me, even if I complained. I felt a sense of despair at that time. However, after some thought, I realized something. If they wouldn't believe me, I needed evidence. Since I found out that Tom had a remote meeting today, I'd secretly planned to expose his true nature. I just didn't expect him to attack my belly. It was my fault for being careless. Anyway, everyone at work is a witness, so there's no escaping this now. Let's get a divorce. I don't want to see your face anymore. No way. And no, without you. I dexterly pressed. As Tom uttered these pitiful words, someone started knocking at the entrance. As I was about to go, Tom stood in my way, trying to obstruct me. Wait, we're in the middle of a conversation. Is it okay to raise your voice like that? The computer is still connected. Oh. I quickly slipped past the distracted Tom and rushed to the entrance. However, I was caught before I could get far, and my arm was grabbed by him. Don, let me out. This place is out of sight from the computer, just perfect. Hey, let's come up with an excuse together. Should we make it a prank? That's the safest bet. It's more credible if you say it, so tell everyone. No, I won't. I don't want to gauge your mood anymore. Be treated like a slave and be dominated by fear. Someone help. I screamed in my mind. At that moment, I heard a rattling sound from the entrance, and the door swung open vigorously as someone entered from outside. Seeing the person's face, I collapsed on the spot in relief. Are you okay? Chima? It was my Uncle Bob, who apparently secretly joined that meeting. He had watched the video and rushed to our house immediately. Luckily, the front door was left unlocked. Does it hurt anywhere? How about your belly? Bob rushed to my side, pulling me away from Tom. And then Bob shielded me with his back. Thanks to Bob's broad back, I couldn't see Tom. Most likely, Tom couldn't see me either. Hey Bob, you're Hannah's uncle, aren't you? Long time no see. As I secretly glanced from behind Bob, the cunning Tom offered a forced smile. Bob, straightening his posture, looked down at Tom. Bob is taller, making Tom appear very small and delicate. Hannah, can you stand? You should rest on the sofa over there. Ignoring Tom, Bob moved me to the sofa while supporting me. Sitting down brought some relief. Tom tried to approach me, but Bob stopped him with a grim face. Asked for a bit, then let's go to the hospital just in case. That's too much. It was just a little shove. It's part of our intimacy as a couple. How could he perceive it that way? Just stay quiet. Once we confirm Hannah and the baby are okay, we can talk. Don't worry, the meeting was recorded, so you can relax. You were watching. You were watching that? So we are in the same company. Tom clicked his tongue in frustration and fell silent. Really, what a terrible man you married. Hannah, seeing Bob sigh with a stern expression, I felt somewhat apologetic and couldn't say anything. I went to the hospital and confirmed that there were no problems with the baby in my belly. I felt relieved and my whole body relaxed. With that, Bob and I, along with Tom, headed to the company. Bob was like, think of yourself and the baby first. Leave the rest to me? But in the first place, this is a matter between Tom and me. Even if it's Bob, I can't leave everything to him. There could have been a different day to address this, but it's about Tom. The more time we give, the more he might come up with something. I'm already in the last month of pregnancy, and I don't know when labor pains might come. It's best to settle this quickly now. I am a mother. I have a duty to ensure that this baby can be born with peace of mind. When we arrived at the company, we were immediately led to a separate room. It seemed Bob had made the arrangements. There must have been testimony from the employees present at the meeting. In the spacious conference room, the meeting members, Tom and I, and Bob were gathered. Bob handed me my bag, and I took out a piece of paper from inside. It was with a contact number of a lawyer who assists in divorce. I prepared for it a long time ago and kept it in my bag. Tom's face contorted for a moment, but then he smiled uncomfortably. I also have some blame for things being misunderstood. I'll accept the divorce. I didn't really care about the division of property. I'll pay child support too. Perhaps because we were in front of everyone, he was strangely understanding. With Tom's acceptance, the conversation proceeded smoothly. However, when we reached a certain point, Tom froze. Actions. I quit the company or be transferred. Yes, I plan to return after my maternity leave and childcare leave. It wouldn't be good for both of us if you were still here, right? So, I really want you to quit. Tom looked at me seriously and nodded. Precariums. But what about the company's perspective? What are you trying to say? I don't mean to brag, but I think I'm a valuable asset to the company. I've good performance, the problems with relationships, and I have a good reputation with our business partners too. Indeed, Tom, with his pleasant demeanor, was considered the ace of the company, a so-called immediate contributor. And if things continued this way, it was sad that he would undoubtedly become an executive in the future. On the other hand, Hannah is, for better or worse, an average female employee you can find anywhere. Oh, I'm not belittling you, just stating the facts. I understand. Furthermore, if you're a single mother with a small child, you'll inevitably have more time off in the future, right? You'll surely become a burden to the company and your colleagues. I thought about this when I became pregnant. I don't have parents to rely on. If something happens, I have to figure it out myself. That's unavoidable, but for the company, I might honestly be a troublesome employee. I understood what Tom was trying to say, even if I didn't like it. He was implying that the company would choose him, an ace and valuable person who brought complicated risks, even though he caused the problem this time over me. See? So the best thing is to let this incident go and get along again. It's the best for the baby too. I don't want that. Tom looked bewildered. Berate and accept it again? Are you kidding me? That won't change anything. Do you want me to endure the hellish days of being constantly insulted again? The employees whispered among themselves, looking at Tom with puzzled expressions. Especially the female employees were giving him cold glares as if he were a bug. Because we're a couple, we've had our disagreements. But it should be mutual. Is that mutual? The ratio is way off, don't you think? I was always the one being pushed around. As I retorted, Tom seemed unable to hide his agitation. You're like a completely different person. Happened to you. Hannah. Well, until now, I've been patient. I hope that you might change someday. But I never thought you'd lay a hand on our baby. The surroundings' gazes became sharp in an instant. Tom chuckled sheepishly. Sweat trickled down his forehead. Hannah, that's why. Going back to the conversation, let's leave the decision of who will quit to the company. Is that okay? Tom responded energetically. I wonder he was confident that if it's in the case, he would be the one chosen. Well then, we'll proceed with the divorce right away. Thanks for your efforts. Starting now, you and I are strangers. Hang on. Hannah, goodbye. I wanted to get away from this person as soon as possible, with my Uncle Bob accompanying me. I went to consult with the lawyer for divorce process. By the way, Tom seemed to have some strange confidence, but his resignation was certain. It's a bit underhanded. But Bob is our president, in other words, the head of the company. Since the president is on my side, I already know the outcome. It feels a bit unfair, though. Muttering that, Bob furrowed his brows with a stern expression. What? The one at fault is that guy. He doesn't even remember the face of the company's president, let alone act like he's some valuable talent. So arrogant. I vented at Bob. His face turned red with anger. Thanks to talking a lot, I felt refreshed. So, on the way back home, we had a conversation eagerly anticipating the birth of my baby. I've no more worries. I can give birth in peace now. A few days later, I gave birth safely. It was a cute girl. Bob came to the hospital, tearing up like it was his own grandchild. I received a message from Tom saying I wanted to meet her. Did this person forget what he did before my baby was born? I wanted to cut ties with him, but I don't want to risk him getting angry, so I've made the messaging app a way to communicate. By the way, I received daily updates on his situation. After being fired from the company, he got a job in the same industry. But because it's the same industry, Rumors about Tom are already circulating. He lamented, "Everyone is cold to me, and I can't even get a girlfriend." This according to his colleague. Tom lamented, "I could never meet an amazing woman such as Hannah." Well then, don't do things like that. Now, I'm discussing with Bob about my baby's name. We're struggling to come up with a good name. And Bob is already smitten. He's so affectionate that he won't let my baby marry anyone. I couldn't show this grandchild to my parents, but I'm glad Bob is happy. Someday, when my baby learns to speak, I want to make Bob be called her grandpa. Despite appearances, he'll probably burst into tears. I'm looking forward to it. I gave the house to Mom. "If you oppose, I'll divorce you." Suddenly, those were the words I was hit with from Ryan. "I never heard about buying a house for your mother. Where did you get that kind of money anyway?" I asked, and Ryan just smirked. "At Steady Palpy Oysters, I'm selling your dad's vacation home. That'll get us $400,000. Selling my deceased father's beloved vacation home. How could he decide that on his own?" I was furious. But then Ryan shouted, "Either that or divorce." I felt my anger cooling down. "Sir, fine, got it. I won't let you or your family insult mine anymore." I muttered, "So you're saying divorce is the only option? You okay with that?" Ryan asked as if playing his trump card. But I firmly responded, "You'll regret it, you know." "I won't." Ryan laughed loudly, looking all confident. However, just 2 months later, he would appear before me. He would appear before me looking like a shadow of his former self. "My name is Catherine Miller, 50 years old. I got married at 45, and it felt like a miracle at the time. After all, I was quite plain-looking, not particularly outgoing, and generally unnoticeable. I met my husband Ryan at our workplace. I worked in the accounting department, and he had just transferred to the sales department. I had to visit the sales department due to an invoice error. Ryan Miller, who was 32 at the time, corrected the mistake without any fuss, saying, "Oops." He then looked at me and laughed innocently. "Hutchins, you're pretty kind. I'm Taylor." The other accountant scolded me pretty hard the other day. My maiden name was Taylor. Seeing Ryan's friendly smile and his handsome face, I felt he was from a different world than mine. Yet for some reason, he became fond of me, a woman 10 years his senior, and started greeting me every time we crossed paths at the office. The first time he asked me out for drinks. I was surprised that a man would be interested in someone like me. As time passed, we got closer and started dating. Some said I was being fooled, but I was genuinely drawn to his carefree nature. About 2 years into our relationship, Ryan quit and joined a different company. When I asked why, he said, "My current boss is too strict. I want to work more freely." I felt it was a bit immature, but I was indulgent with him. "I hope you find a better boss at your next job," was all he said. And a few months later, we got married. I was 45 and Ryan was 35. I never thought I'd marry someone 10 years younger. My dad, overjoyed by the news of our marriage, offered to cover the entire wedding cost, leading to a grand ceremony. Although I felt a simple wedding would have sufficed at 45, he wouldn't listen. Ryan's mom was single at the time, having divorced his dad. It seemed she felt her role was done when Ryan got his first job, and my father-in-law was the one who initiated the divorce. I didn't know the reason back then, but I would come to understand it firsthand later. Because of these circumstances, we didn't expect any financial help from Ryan's side for the wedding. Once Ryan and I started living in our apartment, his mom, perhaps feeling lonely, began visiting us frequently. It wasn't a bother, but she would always bring expensive desserts with her. "Ryan, look, it's your favorite, right? I bought a bunch, so eat up." My mother-in-law opened her own gift and placed it on the table, but as expected, nothing was set in front of me. Every time she visits, she'd beeline straight to Ryan and converse only with him. It's as if I don't even exist. The rare times she does look my way, she'd make snide remarks like, "I wonder why Ryan married such an older, unattractive woman like you," or "Oh, how gloomy this room is despite the sunny weather. Must be because you're here." And most times she stays for dinner. She'd criticize every dish I serve. "What's this? Cheap-looking meat? Ryan's in his prime, you know. You should serve better quality meat," even if she says so. I can't afford to serve premium meat every day. Every time I place a dish on the table, she'd mumble about how cheap it looks, yet she'd devour everything and leave, which baffles me, though single and unemployed. I always wondered how she could afford such luxury. One day, I was shocked when I updated a long-neglected bank book under Ryan's name. The balance was 0. "Ryan, what did you spend all this money on?" I confronted Ryan, but he just stared blankly at the bank book showing a zero balance. I remember his father had painstakingly saved a considerable sum, hundreds of thousands of dollars for Ryan before their divorce. Yet it was all gone in a few months. I think Mom probably used it. Ryan muttered, "What? Your mother? Why would she use your money without permission?" I exclaimed, and he just sighed deeply. "Well, maybe she's struggling for money since she's single." At best. Regardless, she spent way too much. I protested, but Ryan suddenly glared at me. Don't badmouth, Mom. You really are a cold woman." With that, he locked himself in his room. I was stunned by Ryan's sudden change. Years later, I found out that one of the reasons his parents divorced was due to his mother's reckless spending. After that, I directly told my mother-in-law not to use our money and started monitoring her actions. She constantly complained, calling me a miserable and spiteful daughter-in-law, but if it meant our finances wouldn't be drained, I didn't care. Ryan wasn't pleased either, but if she kept spending like water, we'd soon be bankrupt. We both work, but we still have mortgage payments for our apartment. 2 years later, a new issue arose. Ryan was having an affair. He often came home late from work and lied about working weekends. Suspicious. I hired a detective agency and discovered Ryan's affair with a younger colleague. When I confronted him, instead of apologizing, he got defensive. "How dare you hire a detective? If you have that kind of money, you should have spent it on Mom. Mom, you're really the worst." That's not the point. "Ryan, you had an affair." "Admit it," I pressed, and he just scoffed. "What if I did? I settled for a dull, unattractive woman like you. Can't blame me for straying once or twice. Once or twice? Are there others?" "Shut up. Keep this up, and I'm gonna divorce you." "What divorce?" Seeing my shocked reaction, Ryan seemed to think he'd gained the upper hand. He smirked and stood up. "If you don't like it, then keep your mouth shut. But honestly, even if I stray, I'll always come back to you. You should be grateful." Just with that, he left the room, confronting Ryan about his affair. I couldn't get even a single word of apology. Instead, he seemed to mock me, and this broke my heart, making me cry for days. But when he mentioned divorce, if I divorced, I'd be alone for the rest of my life. The only person who ever wanted to marry someone like me was Ryan. With that thought, I couldn't say anything about his actions anymore. 3 years went by, and I turned 50. That year, my father was diagnosed with colon cancer. By the time they found it, it was already advanced and in its final stages. My mother and I took turns staying by his bedside, caring for him. Though weakened, my father's gentle demeanor remained unchanged, and we were able to spend some peaceful moments together. However, being the CEO of a large corporation, business associates would visit him daily to pay their respect. Every time they did, it seemed to drain him even more. Strangely, during all this, Ryan visited frequently. Even though he had never been fond of visiting my parents since we got married, his sudden change of heart surprised me. "Please stay strong, sir. It'll break Catherine's heart if you don't. You need to live a long life," Ryan would say to him. I sometimes couldn't believe my ears hearing these words from Ryan, but my father seemed to be thankful for him. "Thank you, Ryan, for marrying my shy daughter. Other end, just with a bright man like you by her side. I'm sure she's happy." I had to bite my tongue hearing such words. "Do you think we can visit that vacation home this year?" my father would ask. My father owned a vacation home in Malibu. When I was single, our family of 3 used to visit frequently. But since my marriage, I stopped going because Ryan wasn't keen on spending time with my parents there. Apparently, my parents still visited annually. "Why don't I leave that house to you?" "Ryan, when I'm gone, can you take Catherine there every year?" Tears welled up in my father's eyes as he said this, but Ryan shook his head. "Please don't talk like that, sir. It's bad luck." After a brief pause, Ryan continued, "I promise, if anything were to happen, I'll take good care of that property." Just looking straight into Ryan's eyes, my father nodded in gratitude. But just a few weeks later, my father passed away. While my mother and I were drowning in sorrow, Ryan suddenly dropped a bombshell. "Ex-mate worked for Shell. I've given the house to Mom. If you oppose it, we're gonna divorce," he said. I was in shock. I never heard anything about buying a house for your mother. Besides, where'd you get that kind of money? With a smirk, Ryan replied, "I'm selling your father's vacation home. I'll get $400,000 from it." I couldn't believe what Ryan was suggesting. He promised to take care of that place. Even if I don't want to go there every year, what about my mother? That place means a lot to her, I said. But Ryan just chuckled. I never said I was gonna keep that promise. Thanks to that, your father left me the house in his will. Now we can finally give Mom something nice. What kind of guy are you? I felt my body trembling with anger. All this time, he would go on about Mom, making himself out to be such a mama's boy. But now, I have to admit, he's nothing more than a creepy mama's boy. But the next words out of Ryan's mouth made me doubt my own ears. Mom's gonna get remarried. That's why I'm setting up a house for her and her new husband, he explained. From what I gathered, his mother had made this request. The house they had been living in was old, and she didn't want to be reminded of memories with her late husband. So she wanted to start fresh in a new home and had asked Ryan to help. You must be kidding. Why do you have to provide a home for your mother and her new husband? I asked in near hysteria. But Ryan was deaf to my objections. That's what you call respecting your parents, he said. I felt my blood run cold. All right, I get it. I won't tolerate any more insults from you or your family, I muttered to myself. Well, then looks like we got no choice but to divorce, huh? You okay with that? Ryan said. Plain it seemed like his trump card. But I firmly declared, that's fine, but you'll regret it. At my words, a surprised expression crossed Ryan's face for a moment. But he quickly reverted to his insolent grin. Don't think so. He laughed heartily. Don't act so tough. It's not an act. I'm done being manipulated by you and your mother. The condo is in your name, so good luck with the remaining mortgage payments. I'm moving out, I said, and within a few days, I packed up and left the condo. 2 months after our divorce was finalized, and thanks to the inheritance from my father, her antique apartment was spacious enough for one just as I was getting accustomed to my new surroundings. Ryan showed up at my door. Catherine, I've been looking everywhere for you. It had been a while since I saw Ryan, and he looked worn out, sweating profusely. What do you want? We have no ties anymore. Before I could stop him, he barked into my apartment, shouting, Where did you hide your father's will? Saying that, Ryan started searching around my room. Hey, don't just barge in and make a mess. I'll call the cops. Your dad wrote a will right in front of me, didn't he? Saying he'd leave me that vacation house in Malibu. I can't find that will anywhere. Oh, that will. I discarded it. Wait. Ryan lunged at me, growling. What the hell did you do? I didn't destroy it. My father did. What do you mean? While battling a severe illness, my father had painstakingly written that will. But after Ryan left, I had revealed everything that Ryan and my mother-in-law had done to him. Turns out, Ryan had been cheating all the time, and my mother-in-law had been spending money recklessly, even using up all of Ryan's bank savings. Moreover, they'd frequently been asking us for money. I didn't want to distress my father, but I just couldn't trust Ryan and decided to tell the truth. My father felt remorseful for not realizing my situation earlier, but I assured him with a smile, Dad, I'll be fine. I used to fear being alone, but I'd rather be on my own than to be constantly belittled by people like them. Besides, everyone deserves a second chance. Hearing that, my father smiled and said, You've become strong. Come now. Later, he drafted a proper will and stored it at the town hall. So the property is now under my mom's name, and there's no way you can sell it. Upon hearing this, Ryan's face went pale and he collapsed to his knees. Why? I need the money from selling that vacation house. And what's that for the house you were gonna buy for your mother? Then earn the money yourself. And if you're going to buy a new $400,000 house while still paying off the mortgage for the condo, well, you're such a devoted son, aren't you? It's truly admirable. When I mentioned this, Ryan mumbled in a low voice. I can't even afford the mortgage for my own condo. What? I asked again, but Ryan remained silent. I had seen this coming ever since we decided to divorce. Perhaps because Ryan was coddled by his mother his whole life. He had a very fragile mentality. He struggled with six-key quiz job, he could only handle minor tasks, and even when his boss merely advised him to work more efficiently, he'd get sick. And take time off consequently, he'd end up quitting every new job he took and hop from one job to another. To add insult to injury, he had a wandering eye when it came to women, truly a bad combination. You're probably taking time off from work again, aren't you? I asked in a low voice. Ryan responded, well, actually I quit my job last month and haven't found a new one yet. I'm flabbergasted. Considering his current situation, it's audacious for him to think he could buy a new house for his mother and manage the mortgage after divorcing me. In reality, when we lived Together, I had been covering almost all of our living expenses, from the mortgage to everyday costs. Come on, Catherine. Can't you come back to me? You must be lonely in this place, all by yourself, right? Let's face it, you don't have friends, and no guy would ever be interested in you in the future. Let's stop this charade and start over. That's a joke, right? I shouted, pushing the approaching Ryan away. You think I'm lonely just because I'm alone? Don't make assumptions about me. I'm not going back to that life with you and your mother. Just thinking about it makes my skin crawl. Catherine, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but I've never felt more free and happy in my life. I can go wherever I want, whenever I want, and do what I love. No one to belittle or mock me. You're nothing more than a pest to me. Get out. But Catherine, if you abandon me... Even as he tried to cling to me, I gave him a cold stare. You were always good at fooling women. Remember your mistress? Why don't you ask her for help? That woman, she left me when she realized I had no money. She's really something. Who's the real problem here? I bet you approached me for my money in the first place. Right. I remember when we were at the same company, you were always so curious about my family's background. I remember when I first met Ryan, every time we met at the company, he would skillfully ask about my family. Now looking back, I realize how odd it was, but back then, I was so smitten that I didn't notice. I truly feel I was such a fool. Listen, I took out the mortgage for the new house. I borrowed some money from a not-so-great source. I planned to repay it immediately, so I didn't care much about the interest. But now if I can't pay it back, the debt collectors are on me every day. And because of that, I'm getting complaints from other condos. Complaints from other condo residents. You really are an idiot. I was just astounded at how Ryan kept making things worse for himself, but I had no sympathy for him. By the way, how about your mom's new husband? He could pay for the new house, right? It's their home to live in after her remarriage, so it should be an issue to be settled between his mom and her new husband. But Ryan said, actually, he's not working either. Plus my mom, wanting to feel young since her new husband is 20 years younger, went for plastic surgery. She was planning to pay for the surgery with the money from selling our vacation home. But that plan fell through, so the surgery got halted midway. When her new husband saw her in that state, he took off. What a pair, this mother and son. Both digging their own graves. It's just unbelievable. It's awful, right? But to leave my mom when she's struggling. Your mom has her own problems, choosing such a man. I'm meaning to live in a house someone else built, and he's not even working. Really, what a terrible choice for a second husband. Well, with a mother-in-law like that, who else would be attracted to her? As I was innerly shaking my head, someone appeared at my house. It was my mother-in-law, her face wrapped in bandages. She entered without asking, approaching me aggressively. Utrin, you're not planning to abandon my son, are you? Because of you, both my son and I are in a tough spot. You better sell that vacation home and give us the money. What happened to your face? Because you've been so stingy and not selling the vacation home. My nose surgery got halted. That doctor, once he realized there was no money, just skipped town on me. What? How could this happen? So she got duped by that doctor too? Just disappearing once he realized she couldn't pay. I wanted to get my face fixed by another doctor, but I'd have no money and don't know what to do. Hey, Catherine, it's your responsibility to help us out. You inherited a good amount of money, didn't you? Hand it over to us. Faced with such an outrageous demand, I was in shock. Enough of this. Are you trying to extort me? If you keep this up, I'll call the police on you for trespassing and threats. My raised voice startled my bandaged mother-in-law, making her flinch. How dare you yell at an elderly woman in her frail state? You're such a disgraceful daughter-in-law. I couldn't believe she still thought of my place as hers. Listen, I have no intention of ever dealing with money grubbers like you. You and your failed excuse of a son, there have no choice but to live with the massive debt you've accumulated. If you think someone else is going to clean up the mess you've made, you're sorely mistaken. And by the way, as I spoke, she looked at me fearfully. What is it? I have proof of Ryan cheating on me. During our marriage, I was the one who suffered mentally. I haven't forgiven him for that. I'm going to sue both of you and take you for all you're worth, so be prepared. Hearing this, both of their faces turned pale. I pointed to the door, addressing both of them. If you get it, then stay away from me for good. If you try to approach me again, I'll call the police. With that, both Ryan and my mother-in-law, scared out of their wits, hurriedly left through the front door. I later found out that Ryan and his mother had to give up their new home. Despite that, they're still being hounded by debt collectors since they borrowed money from shady lenders. Ryan couldn't hold down the next job he found and is now working part-time to make ends meet. Just with his income, he couldn't pay off the condo's mortgage, so he had to give it up. Now, the two of them live together in a rundown apartment, exposed to the elements. My mother-in-law still hasn't found a doctor to fix her nose and keeps complaining about how cold air makes her nose hurt. This was all information given to me by the attorney I hired. So even if you seek compensation now, I don't think you'll get anything back. That's okay. Just make the claim. I just want to push them to their limits mentally. I said with a smile as I asked my attorney. Just to Tehran, I became a certified financial planner and started my own practice. I now consult women struggling with issues like my ex-husband's emotional abuse and difficult relationships with their in-laws, helping them navigate financial challenges during divorce considerations. During this journey, I met a man who understood and genuinely needed my work. He reminded me of my late father, a kind-hearted and gentle man. Spending time with him, I realized what true happiness feels like. You see, there's no rush. There's no need to undervalue yourself, because you never know when or how you might meet someone special. And at this age, I feel like I finally found my own form of happiness,